The camera is still in motion. After the energy changes, it lands. The subtle shadow of the slide massages is what I find intolerable. Everything changes at that point. Up until that point, it sounds like just another awkward celebrity story. A snippet from an interview or an ambiguous account of a night out. However, the tone hardens at that point. The hilarity fades. What remains is annoyance that develops into something more acute and intimate. The speaker speaks directly to Tanner. Tense voice, pointing out apparent dishonesty. It is instantly clocked by the internet. Timelines stop. Comments begin to pile up. 'Cause this is no longer just an interview. It goes beyond Tamar Braxton. It concerns what occurs when what happened between you and me was not what I wanted to happen. I didn't. As of right now, I'm still not really proud of it, and I genuinely hope I could return. As the story progresses, names begin to surface when a private matter is made public and someone else decides they're tired of remaining silent. Locations are repeated. The Uber trip, Roof Chris V12. The way the details come together doesn't feel coincidental. Viewers begin to wonder why this is being stated at this time and to whom. The line that takes the story into perilous region then appears. The room becomes quiet once more when she and Mendeecees finish kissing in the back of the automobile. Kissing in the rear of the automobile is alleged. Because this is suddenly explosive rather than just messy, the tone intensifies. This isn't a misunderstanding according to what's being said. Rather, it's a sequence, a night that is repeatedly recounted in bits and pieces. Mendeecees, a married man abruptly thrust into a public narrative, is seated at the center of it. Liar, God damn you. All right, that evening was never concerning me. Zoe, you, and everyone else. You guys were trying to find something to eat. You guys asked me over the phone what was going on in my direction. Everything up my way closed. I said, Chris, we could always go roofing, I thought. I met you at Roof Chris after you said, fuck it. Meet me at Roof Chris. Zoe, and you? Mandy and his homeboy enter. All right, so this is the third time that you and I have hung together. Mendeecees appears out of nowhere. Now you can do whatever the heck you want to her. He's kept it to himself. Online. People quickly begin making connections. Scoo. Some claim that it sounds like retribution turning into protection. All right. Some say it feels like a warning shot, not only at Tamar. All right. However, underlying all the rage at anyone who advances the narrative. Everything is reframed in a single sentence. The lone individual who made a mistake in this Yandandi is the circumstance. The cliff dot is that. Because what appears to be a diatribe could actually be a line if that is the speaker's perspective. Being sketched. And what transpired that evening is no longer the question. Who's going to answer next is the question. After the first shock fades into something more serious, the tale doesn't pick up speed. Because this isn't merely a response to one interview. Mendeecees and you are slyly interacting. At the V12, Mendeecees was behind us. All right, he simply didn't want to enter. Or they had set it up so he wouldn't have to spend all of his time watching the review footage. It's the gradual disintegration of a private evening that was uninvitedly brought into the public eye. The speaker establishes reluctance right away. There's no haste to talk, no desire to reveal. They freely admit that they have no idea how to react at all. This hesitancy is important because it presents the subsequent events as a reaction rather than an assault. It implies a person who remained silent for as long as possible until silence turned into deception. The speaker claims they weren't sure how to react. The main source of tension is one particular item. Control of narrative. Did you make a mistake? That is incorrect. Tamar, additionally, it's unfair to me and it hurts my feelings. My emotions are deeply offended by your attempts to create. This speaker claims that the problem is not that Tamar spoke in public, but rather the manner in which she did so. The presentation of the evening as a birthday, as a kind act, as in they are triggered by an innocent moment that somehow went bad. The details don't match the actual events of the night. Not because birthdays didn't occur that week. When the statement, "you do just enough," becomes a key accusation, it's repeated with frustration, almost exhaustion, at least from their point. A view implies subtle manipulation by stating just enough to pique interest. They nearly perished when they awoke in a pool of blood. I didn't play it during the interview, but you mentioned that you nearly died when you woke up in a pool of blood. I TY, but not enough to accept accountability for the outcomes. Not enough to put an end to speculation, but enough to start it. And the harm comes from supposition. The speaker starts meticulously, almost painstakingly, rebuilding the night. Not dramatically, not emotionally, but chronologically. Let's act in this manner. Tamar, I was never at ease with the relationship you and Mendeecees had in front of me, which was part of the issue with the whole situation. All right, everything you're at hunger hotspots that were still open were recommended by the calls. Roof Crisp was selected for practicality rather than celebration. She was hosting a party for a friend's birthday, which was repetitive. Want to know why? When we returned to Tamar's house, I didn't get out of the car and accompany her upstairs. Because following her and Mendeecees, I assumed they wanted to be up there alone after they managed to kiss in the back of that damned car. For this reason, it seems deliberate that we were left out of these details. It has nothing to do with glitz. It's important to anchor the narrative in something unremarkable and unromantic. Describing the meeting with Chris on the roof and the formation of plans. This is where the party concept starts to fall apart. The speaker maintains that there was no setup, occasion, or intention that would support subsequent allegations that a friend was given something special. They draw attention to the lack of marks and signals that would suggest a celebration. They make a clear line between a planned party and just hanging out, even though they admit that it was officially their birthday week. Furthermore, this distinction is protective rather than petty. Because everything is reframed moment, the word party enters the public discourse. Creates a sense of implicit responsibility when someone gives generously only to be harmed later. Additionally, the speaker claims that this framing portrays them as the antagonist. The friend who failed to defend the friend who was abandoned. That's the painful part. They state it clearly. They are offended, not wounded pride, not wounded ego. Here the tone changes. Disappointment replaces the rage. They discuss observing how the internet responds, observing how scraps are turned into hypotheses on blogs, observing strangers determine who is to blame for the incident. The speaker claims their sentiments are harmed later that evening. Here's where the quiet becomes risky because people make assumptions when there is no clarification. The speaker claims that those presumptions fell on them. People questioning why they left, why they didn't go upstairs, and why would a true friend leave? However, the speaker maintains that there was a cause, which makes the party narrative even more difficult to accept. They talk about being uncomfortable for a long time. Before anything went awry, Tamar and Mendeecees' frequent proximity in public places made me uneasy. Repeated meetings are uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with body language that deviated from their perception of proper behavior. This unease isn't shown as jealousy. It is presented as consciousness. They talk of seeing Mendeecees arrive separately, staying well out of sight, then meeting up later instead of entering together. The speaker said that this was not a coincidence. Arrangement is an attempt to stay out of the spotlight and stay out of the fray. As the night goes on, they mention Mendeecees arriving separately. Plans are constantly evolving. Buckhead sauce V12. The speaker keeps saying that they were reluctant to leave. That is important. It portrays their presence as hesitant rather than committed. They weren't looking for thrills. They were being dragged along. Then, in the speaker's opinion, everything is explained. The Uber ride. They assert that people were freely crossing boundaries, kissing, and sitting on laps in the back of the vehicle. They were uncomfortable enough to draw a boundary because of this behavior. They claim that this is the reason they chose not to travel. Later, upstairs, they felt that it was obvious that people sought privacy, not because they didn't care, because it entirely reverses the narrative. The explanation of why they did not walk upstairs at this particular moment becomes crucial to the plot. Suddenly, the concern is not why they left a drunken friend behind, but rather why they would meddle in an already private matter. The speaker implies that it would have been more improper to stay than to go. This is the point at which the speaker's account and the version found online completely diverge. According to the speaker, the reason why others questioned their allegiance, accused them of being careless, and called them dirty, uncaring, and dismissive was because of a narrative that suggested they left someone vulnerable following a party they purportedly gave. However, the speaker completely rejects that framework. They maintain that they returned home. They maintain that they were not present when the events occurred upstairs. They maintain that someone who wasn't present cannot be held accountable. Mendeecees becomes inevitable at this point. He is not charged with any particular act by the speaker. They don't explain a crime. Rather, they offer a straightforward assertion. Those who went upstairs are the only ones who know what happened there, and Mendeecees and his friend were part of that, according to their narrative. By itself, its sentence isn't explosive. The context is what makes it explosive, because there had already been a lot of speculation on the internet at this point. The speaker expresses their displeasure about being used as a stand-in for solutions they lack, including theories regarding injuries, violence, and cover-ups. Thousands of people are described as waiting for them to speak, waiting for affirmation, waiting, seeking blame, and they decline to assign it. Until today, at least, the emotional tone has entirely shifted by the end of this part. What started off as annoyance has solidified into determination. The speaker is no longer attempting to diffuse the situation. They're sketching boundaries, taking back their place in the narrative, and refusing to become collateral damage in what they perceive to be another person's media frenzy. There is one unsolved reality that lies behind it all. There's always a cost when a private evening turns into a public rumor. Additionally, the speaker in this tale claims that they already had. By the time this narrative, the frustration is no longer boiling as it proceeds to the next stage. It has become more deliberate and colder. Since the speaker is now responding to many interviews, they're reacting to the fallout. The true harm occurs in the aftermath. The speaker claimed that the narrative no longer belonged to any one individual once it went online. Blogs took notice of it. The comment sections went crazy. Strangers started piecing together bits and pieces of a night they weren't there, assigning motive, intent, and placed blame with assurance that was not supported by the facts. Momentum was the source. Furthermore, momentum might be harmful. The speaker discusses how rapidly the story solidified, how quickly people determined what kind of friends they were, and how easily they were incorporated into plots they didn't start. This was no longer merely rumors. It was a media frenzy, which they claim they never agreed to participate in. The idea that they deserted a vulnerable person is the most painful. Everything is clouded by that charge. The speaker claimed that the identical question was frequently asked online. Why didn't you go upstairs and remain if she was intoxicated? Something wasn't right. Why didn't you defend her? At this point, the speaker makes a strong pushback. They disagree with the notion that loyalty entails putting discomfort aside. The idea that staying would have been safer or more suitable is rejected by them, and they maintain that context is important, particularly when it is omitted from public retellings. The speaker brings up the discomfort once more, but with more pointed edges this time. Long before anything went wrong, they recount recurring situations that caused them anxiety. And before you race to the internet, you didn't consider trying to figure out what had happened to your ass. I've long since told you that I'm not them. I am not a member of your support team. Public intimacy, physical familiarity, and a relationship that, in their opinion, frequently broke boundaries. The speaker claims that the relationship that was on display made them uneasy. This unease isn't presented as a rumor. It is presented as an observation, something they saw firsthand, and something that affected their choices that evening. They stress that people are ignoring what has already happened when they wonder why they didn't go upstairs. occurred in plain sight. The speaker claims that the tone had already been established by the time the vehicle came to a stop at Tamar's house. They felt that privacy was being deliberately selected because the lines had already been breached. That conviction becomes the core of their defense. They maintain that their departure was not motivated by apathy. They departed out of deference, reverence for what seemed to be happening between Mendeecees and Tamar. If they had stayed, they would have put themselves in an already personal and awkward situation. However, that was not how the internet perceived it. Rather, restraint was seen as cowardice, distance as disdain, and quiet as guilt. And as this speaker relates, they saw this interpretation proliferate unchecked. This is when the accusations of injuries become crucial, even if the original story continued to develop online. The speaker alludes to Tamar's online experience, claiming that she nearly died and woke up in a pool of blood. They acknowledge that something occurred. They contest how such assertions sparked conjecture, especially in the absence of responses. Alludes to the assertion that one woke up in a pool of blood. The speaker said that one assertion altered everything. Curiosity turned into fear. Gossip developed into terror, and all those involved that evening were instantly suspected, even them. Thousands of people were waiting for them to speak, believing that since they had been together the previous evening, they must know something, be hiding something, or be at fault. However, the speaker maintains that they were unaware of what was placed. More significantly, they maintain that they never claimed to be aware. They compare what was stated subsequently in the interview with that internet assertion. Being told to call an ambulance when at home, rejecting it. The speaker does not provide a medical analysis of this. They do a narrative analysis of it. The narratives don't match, all right? And trust erodes when stories don't line up. Their rage is fueled by this deterioration, because in accordance with Tamar was taking advantage of the attention, enjoying the media hype, and letting theories circulate without intervening to correct them while the internet was dissecting them. This isn't offered as an established truth. It's portrayed as the speaker's experience of being abandoned, exposed, and sacrificed for a plot. They make it clear that they are not a member of Tamar's support team and are not in need of access, money, or influence. This betrayal hurts more since they say their friendship is sincere. The speaker claims they are true friends and don't need anything from her. The bitterness grows when the speaker remembers being called contemptuous for calling Tamar that lady. People took offense and accused them of cruelty on the internet. However, the speaker claimed that disengagement was deliberate. It was self-defense on an emotional level. They asserted that they had a gut feeling that nothing illegal had occurred, that authorities would have been involved right away if something really severe had happened. Additionally, they didn't want to employ dramatic wording to encourage conjecture. But this conviction did not shield them from criticism. Rather, it made them even more alone. They talk of being misunderstood, insulted, and devoured online, portrayed as the antagonist in a narrative they claim not to have written. And throughout it all, as Section 2 comes to an end, the speaker's tone shifts from being offensive to resigned, acknowledging that by speaking now they'll be called untidy, dishonest, or dramatic. They even give others permission to perceive them in that manner. However, they will no longer tolerate silence while someone else publicly alters the history. And the same unresolved tension hangs over everything. Why was the internet included in the mystery at all? If the truth is still unknown months later, when the speaker arrives at this point, a profound change has occurred. This is no longer about correcting a detail or justifying a decision. It's about establishing a clear boundary between proximity and duty and refusing to allow those to remain perplexed. The speaker leans toward a reality that they claim has been disregarded from the start. Someone is not held responsible only because they were there earlier in the evening for the future. They repeat it again, forcefully but not loudly or theatrically, especially when they weren't present. They returned home. They didn't head upstairs. They weren't there when anything occurred. However, they claim that the internet made a different decision. Here's where the collateral damage begins to make sense. The speaker adds that the public began searching for villains rather Then facts after the story of nearly dying entered the discourse. Assumptions abound in timelines. What had happened was no longer a question. They were determining who was at fault. The person who was still able to speak was also the easiest target. They explained how thousands of people waited for them to speak. Not out of fear, but rather in anticipation, waiting for affirmation, scandal, or blame. Furthermore, the pressure wasn't mild. Messages, remarks, conjecture, and more conjecture were all prevalent. However, the speaker maintains that they declined to take on that job. They claimed to have told the truth as they understood it. They returned home. They were unaware of what had occurred, because it didn't give the internet what it wanted. That truth didn't please anyone. A tidy conclusion. This annoyance overflows into the speaker's discussion of media storms. They accuse Tamar of making one without thinking about who might be involved, of making a public statement before making any private. Clarifications of letting disorder spread while others suffer the repercussions. They don't present this as malevolent. They present it as a negligent. The speaker asserts that you have no influence over how a mystery involving injuries, blood, and near-death claims spread.